Hey everyone, welcome. Get ready because today we're tackling a massive paradigm shift in modern network security. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here for this explainer covering the Day 44 curriculum, VPN and Zero Trust. We're looking at a complete evolution in how we protect our digital assets. Okay, let's dive right into this and explore exactly how the security frameworks of yesterday are being completely reimagined for the threats of today. So here's our roadmap for the explainer. First, we'll look at the VPN versus Zero Trust. Then, we'll break down defining micro-segmentation, followed by identity security fundamentals. And finally, we'll tie the whole shebang together in our hands-on project, building a Zero Trust architecture. All right, let's jump right into Section 1, the VPN versus Zero Trust. Now, to truly appreciate the elegance and, frankly, the absolute necessity of this modern security framework, we first have to understand the legacy systems it's actively replacing. So I want to start by challenging you with a simple but pretty profound question. Why is the traditional network failing? Take a second to really think about this. For decades, organizations have literally spent billions building these massive digital perimeters, firewalls, gateways, incredibly complex defense perimeters. But breaches, they're still happening constantly. Why is that? Well, it's because the way we work, and where our data actually lives has fundamentally changed. The old model was built for an era that honestly just doesn't exist anymore. And that brings us to the traditional model, which relies heavily on the VPN, or virtual private network. Now, the VPN isn't inherently bad, but it operates on a classic castle and moat analogy. Just imagine a medieval castle surrounded by a deep moat with a single drawbridge. The VPN is essentially the guard at that drawbridge. It checks your credentials once. But here's the fatal flaw with this setup. Once you cross that moat and get inside the castle walls, you are implicitly trusted. You generally have broad access to just wander the halls, visit the treasury, access whatever you want. In a digital sense, if an attacker manages to steal a single set of VPN credentials, they cross the moat and suddenly, boom, they have the keys to the entire kingdom. And that right there is exactly why we need a completely new approach: Zero Trust. This is a modern security model that requires strict identity verification for every single person and device trying to access resources. And that applies regardless of whether they're inside or outside the network perimeter. Going back to our castle analogy, Zero Trust assumes the moat is already compromised. Instead of one guard at the front gate, Zero Trust is like having a heavily armed guard checking a secure keycard at every single interior door every single time you try to turn a handle. It operates on the core principle of never trust, always verify. The contrast between these two philosophies is just stark. The VPN model gives us perimeter defense and broad access. It's built on implicit trust. Zero Trust, on the other hand, gives us continuous verification and the principle of least privilege. And that means you only get access to the exact data you need to do your job and absolutely nothing more. It is a complete 180-degree shift from the old way of doing things. It's not just some new software tool. We're talking about an entirely new architectural mindset. Moving right along to Section 2, defining micro-segmentation. So, you might be wondering, how do we actually build this? Well, that brings us to micro-segmentation, which is the very first critical building block of a Zero Trust environment. Micro-segmentation is exactly what it sounds like. It's the process of dividing a network into separate, isolated segments to rigidly control and limit access. If Zero Trust is the philosophy of checking keycards at every interior door, micro-segmentation is the literal mechanism of building those interior walls and locked doors. Instead of one massive, flat network where a hacker can just easily jump from, say, an HR server over to a financial database, microsegmentation puts each of those resources in its own locked vault. It makes lateral movement across the network virtually impossible for an attacker. The core purpose of microsegmentation is really simple: contain the breach. Secure the interior. Think of a submarine, right? If a submarine's hull is breached, they don't just let the whole ship flood. No way. They seal off the watertight doors, containing the water to a single compartment so the rest of the ship stays buoyant and operational. Microsegmentation is your network's watertight doors. It is literally the ultimate form of digital damage control, which leads us perfectly into Section 3, Identity Security Fundamentals. Let's see how this all builds into our next critical component. Because look, you can have all the locked doors in the world, but they're completely useless if you don't know who holds the keys. Identity security is the practice of securing digital identities and ensuring that only authorized users and devices can access specific resources. If microsegmentation is that heavy steel door, identity security is the incredibly sophisticated retinal scanner right next to it. It's the process of rigorously checking the ID badge of whoever is trying to turn the handle. It constantly asks, are you really who you say you are? Is your device secure? Are you logging in from a normal location? And if any of those answers seem even a little suspicious, access is instantly denied. There's just this beautiful synergy between these two concepts. Identity security is entirely focused on the who. Who's accessing the data? How are we verifying the user? Meanwhile, micro-segmentation is focused on the what. What are they actually trying to access? How is the network isolated? The reality is, you simply cannot have a true zero-trust architecture without both of these working perfectly in tandem. You absolutely have to know exactly who is acting, and you have to strictly limit what they can touch. All right, let's tie it all together in Section 4, Project Zero Trust Architecture. Okay, we've covered the theory, the why, and the how. Now it's time to take everything we've just learned and actually put it into practice. Step 1, establish identity security. You'll start by locking down those user credentials and setting up strict verification protocols. Step 2, implement micro-segmentation. You're going to go in and physically divide the network, building those watertight doors to prevent any lateral movement. And by executing those 2 steps flawlessly, you arrive at Step 3, achieve zero trust. So the crucial takeaway here is that zero trust isn't something you can just buy off a shelf in a shiny box. It's an architecture you have to actively construct by combining robust identity verification with incredibly disciplined network segmentation. I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. Are you ready to abandon implicit trust in your own networks? Because the days of the castle and moat, they're over. The threats out there are just too sophisticated and the stakes are way too high. It's time to embrace a world where we never trust and we always verify. Take these concepts, dive right into your architecture project, and start building the future of network security today. Good luck out there and keep learning.